So have you all found the chats? Have you all found it? Yeah. Hello, Nkem. So we have some people say, yeah. So Joanna just shared a message on the chat. No worries for the kids. Share the message. So if you can share your name, your business, and your main concern at the moment, that would be great. How this webinar is going to work is that I'm going to do a little introduction, then it's going to be the webinar, and then we're going to have a Q&A. So if you want to talk at some point, you can use the chat to say that you have a question, or use the function that is raise your hand on Zoom. So there's something called raise your hand. If you want to manage participants, you click on participants, you'll be able to see options to raise hands or ask, I have a question to ask. Okay, so we have Kate, who's running Sound Universe London. And yes, okay, so yeah, we have had lots of people with a business model revolving around events that had to cancel. So hopefully this will help as well to understand how you shift. Hello, Callie from Betty Bloom Dance.
I'm not able to find it.
Yes, Natasha, you raise your hand. Tasha?
Hi.
Hey, you raise your hand. Do you want to say something?
Hi, my name is Attack Everyone. I didn't really know what I was doing.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying reading some comments, and I'll respond to a few of them as I can. I think you're not alone, Ruth. Some of this fear is that your businesses can go online. You just are not comfortable with the technology. And, you know, we did, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Federation of Small Businesses. I was supposed to launch the West London Connect group last night at a pub. Obviously could not do that. And so we launched it online with Zoom. You know, what we did was we sent out a how-to from YouTube to everyone before so that they could understand it. We had a 15-minute kind of entry period where people could struggle and call us and get online. So, but I hear you. I think fear of tech is a big challenge at the moment as well, right? So, virtual marketplace, encouraging people to, yeah. So that you could be very well suited for what's going on right now for mid-tribe. Events is coming up quite a lot. I mean, I use a lot of events myself, so I can definitely talk a little bit about that in the Q&A section. The government relief is a little bit, I think, still vague. I think they're announcing a lot of stuff because they need to put people at ease. I think the practicalities of how we're going to be able to access this funding is what's still really up in the air. And we're going to continue to need to share that with you. I got a few links in some of the WhatsApp groups I'm in today about applications and things. I'm still vetting them because I think the other thing I'm seeing is a lot of misinformation. People are sharing things prematurely without actually vetting information, and not all of it's real. So, you know, as part of our support, I need to go through all the things I'm finding and people are sharing with us, figuring out what's real, and then figuring out the practical ways of accessing this funding. I mean, I don't think we're going to be like Trump and send everyone a $1,000 check. I think it's going to be different in this country. I don't know anyone who's following world politics, but that's what they're proposing over in the US. Very different conversation if that's really going to fix everyone's problems, but we'll keep it coming in terms of practical ways to access some of that funding. Online school of UX designers, online business we fear they could be impacted. Yep, Yeah, I mean, in terms of the online event stuff, a question that was raised in one of my groups today was, do we still charge for these things, right? Are people still willing, not just willing to pay, but able to pay? And, so there's a lot of people doing free online events, which now we're competing with. So then how do we charge for our events? But also from a consumer perspective, cash flow is not just a problem for us as businesses, right? It's also a problem for people across the board. So I think we're all in the same boat. But we're going to do a town hall element at the end where we can go into these a bit more detail. If more questions arise during the talk, feel free to keep popping them in there. Do we?
Brilliant. I think we can start. I'm just going to quickly, just to keep on schedule, just introduce myself and introduce Hatch a little bit. I know that there's a lot of people coming from Hatch in the chat at the moment, but there's also a name that I've never seen before, so it's a great way for us to introduce what we do. So Hatch is a charity. We're a charity incubator and accelerator, primarily working with social enterprises and female founders, so women-led businesses. And we have been around for 7 years now. As a charity, we started in Brixton, where we organically worked with a lot of women helping their own community. And turns out there were a lot of BAME women, so that we grew out of this audience quite naturally. And the years coming and us doing our work, we've worked with a lot of corporates that sponsor our programs. And what we do is that we have 2 tracks, so for social enterprises and female founders. And what we do is that we take businesses from when they have just an idea in our Launchpad to help them understand what it is to be a business owner. We also work with an incubator. So this is when businesses have started trading or have an MVP being, as you must know, minimum viable product. And we also have an accelerator. And the accelerator is definitely for businesses that are established, that have 1 to 3 members of staff, that have a turnover, and that they are ready to scale. One of the thing that we do at Hatch is that we are not specifically a tech accelerator. So we have had businesses that were tech, but we are more into like businesses that are non-tech. Although everyone now have a website, so we're kind of all tech. So yeah, that's basically what we do. At the moment, we're recruiting for 2 amazing programs, 2 accelerator and 1 incubator. We will have a Launchpad as well in July. I will put all the information in the follow-up email, and I will put information in the chat room as well. The reason why we have Susan today is because she's part of our Accelerator program. She's one of the expert speakers on it. And when this crisis happened, we were all trying to understand what we were going to do, and we all have to adapt, be more agile. And turns out that Susan did it with Ugenie, her platform. So you had to adapt twice, and you're going to go through that right now. So to you now.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm gonna talk about Ugenie. I'm gonna talk about my previous business as well, in which it wasn't a technical platform and where we had to pivot. Also, just introduce the concept of pivoting, right? Because it's also, a lot of times we have assumptions of what pivoting means, and actually, there's a lot of different places within our businesses that we can pivot. Some of the current things I'm seeing people doing already in response to the crisis. So examples of other startups and businesses. I mean, time out is now time in, things like that. It can be as small as a branding pivot to try to get your message out there, to actually delivering lattes, right? So I read about this Australian company that's delivering lattes because they closed the cafe down. I'm going to caveat this with, probably can't fix everyone's problems, right? We don't have a magic pill. I will share as much as I can to try to help. To a certain extent, we have to keep watching. What we were talking about in the beginning is the government support that I think is coming for all of us. And so, in a positive note, innovation. Times like this really does inspire a lot of innovation. Some of the companies that survived the 2008 crisis are the biggest companies today. And so, you know, if we can, I know there's a lot of reality right now with cash flow issues, staff issues, product delivery issues, supply chain issues, you know, all of these things. But if we can look at ways to innovate what we're offering in all the various parts of our businesses, it might be a temporary fix for now, or it might create something that becomes a bigger part of the new normal, which I do think we're going to get. So we kind of already did a little bit of Zoom etiquette, but you know, let's keep our microphones muted if you're not speaking until the end. If you do have a question, drop it into the chat box. You can private message me as well. So if you feel like there's something you may not want to share with everyone, you feel free to just send me a PM or one of the team from Hatch. And again, if you want to share what your business does, I think we've already started that. So why am I here? Who am I? Let me just briefly introduce who I am. So my name is Susan Kabani. I'm the founder of a virtual community platform. It's called Ugenie. So actually, I live in this virtual space. I am a tech founder, but I am not technical, if that makes sense. So my background is actually intellectual property law and business development. I didn't ever in my life think I was going to be managing a tech platform. But here we are. It's a private version of LinkedIn for brands and communities who just want that one central place to share important information and build stronger relationships with existing memberships. So if we're giving it away right now to charitable, non-for-profit, local community organizations. It's just, if anyone can see people in need, please connect them with us. We're giving it away for free. Okay, so in terms of pivot, now, when we first think of pivoting, the first thing that comes to my mind is the scene from Friends when they're trying to get that sofa up the stairs, right? The pivot. I could try to put a GIF in here and it didn't work, but I'm also a very, very big Friends fan. So before I kind of got into the business world, when I would thinking about pivoting, this is what I would think about. And what lessons can we learn from this? He clearly had not measured the staircase and the dimensions of the sofa and hadn't done any planning to get that sofa up the staircase. And we all saw what happened at the end. It was in two pieces on the floor. I mean, if those of us that watch Friends. So that's originally, I think of pivot and I think of that. When we start thinking about pivoting in the business context, and obviously when I started my first business, so before Ugenie, I am a lawyer, but I actually never practiced. I went and I worked for a laser manufacturer as their in-house counsel, but ended up taking over business and operations. And with laser companies, and this was like beauty treatments, so hair removal, laser, skin treatments, a lot of the regulations were changing. I joined the company in 2009, and the laws at that time were our external force that was changing the way that we were running the company. All of a sudden, salons that we could sell our equipment to could no longer sell their equipment or no longer do the treatments because the regulations had come in. In fact, it was called an intense pulse light machine. It's IPL. It's too technical. It doesn't really matter. But the idea is that when the company was launched, that machine could be sold to everyone with a minimal version of training done by the manufacturer. Laws came out and actually made it where people needed a NVQ3 or a higher level of qualification to run the equipment. And all of a sudden we're like, well, what do we do? This is a huge factor. We can no longer, it's going to hit our business in a really, really big way. And so what are we going to do? So at that stage, we decided to build a training arm of the business and we started to bring in training. If we can't sell our equipment without training, then we need to do the training ourselves as well and not rely on other companies. We also started looking at affiliate models with training academies to see if we could, funnel people to a training academy. Because again, they have all the infrastructure, the resources. Why build things from scratch? Let's just try to get our people trained up so that we can sell our equipment. And then some of the other things we started looking at is what were the complementary products that went along with our laser equipment, right? So when you do a hair removal treatment, you need the gel. We didn't manufacture gel, so we thought, could we now bring in some gel? Could we actually start selling some of the byproducts that are associated with our equipment? What is the cost of that? And we started to pivot to become more than a single product company so that we could protect ourselves from things like that. So, it started with that in terms of my pivoting experience. Ugenie, we did it a lot more, and I'm going to specifically talk about Ugenie and the lessons learned in that. after we've talked about pivoting just a bit more. So if we look at the definition of pivoting, it usually occurs when a company makes a fundamental change to their business after determining, and from my experience, and I'll talk about it, is through product market fit research, that the product isn't meeting the market, right? So generally we think about pivoting when, oh shit, something hit the fan, we need to pivot our business because we're either not selling enough or there isn't enough consumer demand. I mean, trust me, I get pushback all the time. Why are you trying to compete with Facebook, right? So that's the kind of big pushback we get. We're not actually trying to do that. So maybe we need to pivot our marketing message to make people really understand what our product has to offer. So I'll drop in something like experimental stuff as I'm talking about this as well. A pivot is also usually intended to help a business recover from a tough period. I think we can all agree we're going to all collectively be going through a tough period. So, you know, as much as we are trying to find a way to survive, I think we can also be a little bit, I'm not letting everybody off the hook, but I'm saying we're collectively all growing through the same thing. It's not just a, you know, some of these things we may not be able to fix right now, and we're going to have to figure out how to get through it in a bigger way with our communities, with supporting each other. So, but surviving after experiencing new competition or market factors that make your business model unsustainable. Many times a company only has to change one problem that needs to be addressed. So again, in my laser manufacturing example, the barrier was the training. So we had to bring in something that supported the training so that it wouldn't affect our actual selling of the product and the equipment. I mean, the other thing I would say from a company, and this was also a pivot, was the way that they did their operations when we first started. I went into the business and everything was paper, and this was 2009. We didn't even have an electronic Excel spreadsheet of the 2,000 customers we were serving in the UK. So how do I then go and let those people know about the training regulation updates or the aftercare? Having those systems in place as well can, you know, be a way that an operational pivot, a way that you're managing your data pivot. So we're going to talk, I'm going to actually go into all of the examples of where you can pivot. And I think actually one of my notes that I wanted to say before we all jumped in was, I think businesses are going to be in two camps right now. I'm not sure where everyone's business here sits, but I think there's the camp of businesses that are lean startups as it is and potentially have enough runway to survive for the next 6 months or 9 months or whatever runway you have left. And so there's going to be some kind of tips and stuff for you guys. And I think there's obviously those businesses that are dependent on revenue to survive, to pay their people, to keep their business open. Also, we'll try to share tips for that. But, you know, we do have, I think, two different camps of types of businesses right now, especially in the startup world. So if we look at the different ways in which you can pivot, you know, turning one feature of a product into the product itself. So resulting in something that's a bit more streamlined. You know, an example of this might be someone that was already potentially doing online courses and doing in-person courses. So right now, with nobody able to travel as of maybe tomorrow, I don't know, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but we know tubes were starting to shut down today in London, you know, and not being able to, you know, again, those Australian companies that are delivering their lattes, well, if we go into lockdown, even that's not a solution anymore. You can't deliver the lockdown, you know, in a lockdown. So what can we be doing that might already be in a product, that one feature in your product that can then become more streamlined? So you're all focusing on your efforts. Social media right now is going to blow up. And of course that offers us a marketing engine. It also just means everybody else is doing it as well. So how do we get our message through? And if we're focusing and doubling down on one thing in our business, our messaging can be all about that one thing, especially if it's relevant to what's going on, and you can tweak it to be relevant to what's going on in the external market right now. The opposite of that is to take the product, one feature, and build a larger suite of services. Now, this might only be possible for those businesses that already have a bit of runway or have some capital. You know, us, for example, we were in a product development phase. We were expanding from mobile app only to web. And so we're doubling down on that right now. But I mean, I will say I'd be very open. I'm fortunate because actually I'm a lean startup anyway that had the funding in place for that. So that's only if you're in that camp that can put that money aside and maybe just focus on product development, product market fit, because a lot of people are sitting around at home. Once the panic kind of subsides, I'm sure you'll find people in your network to help you with product market fit. Focusing on a different set of customers by positioning a company into a different market or vertical. So what I've heard about is this it was a delivery company that has gone after pharmaceuticals right now, pharmacies who obviously have a bigger demand to get medication out to the elderly. And so they shifted from a delivery of just general household products to talking to pharmacies and saying, how can we help you right now? How can we get this medication? And they might become, the best pharmacy medicine delivery company once all of this subsides. So again, maybe taking a look at every part of the business, and we'll look at the strategies of how to pivot. But the main thing will be looking at every part of the business very, very critically and thinking about what could be used or in the current market, and looking at what the needs are. I would say locally as much as internationally, and we may go in lockdown, but I think there's going to be a hyper local focus for the next 3 to 6 months with communities really coming together. So is there something that you can offer your local community, which you may not have been focusing on before? Changing your platform, saying from an app software to vice versa. Like I said, Ugenie's mobile app, which is the key value of that, is we're all running around all the time at these events, networking and stuff. You need everything to be on a phone. Well, actually, at the moment, it'd be better if we were web, because people are sitting at their laptops and they're going to have a lot of time at home. So again, if there's that ability to change the platform or the delivery vehicle, that is another way to try to pivot in an operational sense rather than what you're actually offering. Employing a new revenue model to increase monetization. So, a lot of the conversations that have been going on about being able to pay suppliers being able to pay you, consumers being able to pay you, we're looking at deferred payment plans, and for some models, we're giving it free as we can. If you can't afford that, can you do a critical look at the cash flow and offer it at a minimal price to let you survive, but still get that product out there in deferred payments? Because I think consumers in general are going to have less money in their bank to pay for our products and services. And then using different technologies to build a product. And I think this is going to be relevant to everyone, right? We're all trying to figure out, if we can, how we take our things online, and how we can create that. So, as I mentioned before, there have been a lot of, pivots are not new. Let's talk about some of the kind of more, the ones that you may know about or maybe didn't. I mean, YouTube, we all use it. It's a great platform for education. So if you're a little bit fearful of any of the technology, not sure how to use it, reach out to someone in your network, my network, reach out to me if there's something that you want to learn how to use. But YouTube started out as a dating platform. Their byline was, tune in and hook up. And they did a quite big pivot because they saw that opportunity to offer more than video dating, and pivoted that. Slack was a gamification tool, so it was actually more about gamifying. And we've all, those of us that use Slack is now a co-working or a communication tool for within businesses, has seen how that has changed because it went after a different vertical. Groupon was a social platform where people gathered behind charitable and social causes. That is completely different than what it is today. I think Groupon has been probably one of the worst and best thing that's ever happened to a lot of businesses. Groupon for us, when it first came out in 2010, a lot of salons started running it. Our first salon that ran it, when I was at my laser machine business, they had 1,000 people book a course of 6 treatments. Of course, Groupon took a huge cut. They had to buy a second piece of equipment and then have a new member of staff just to keep that Groupon fulfilled. Yes, they got the follow-up appointments, but then they also brought the price down in the market for everyone else, and it really killed that market for most people. So, I mean, Groupon can be great from a consumer perspective, but I mean, I would also say the quality of service. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. Shopify started as a e-commerce platform for the founders. They wanted to build something to sell their own product. Their business actually didn't work, but their technology scaled. So, have you built something already that maybe a consumer can't take advantage of, but could another business actually take advantage of something that you've built? I'm not going to build Zoom inside Ugenie. We're going to use Zoom and integrate it. So I'm also talking to other startups right now, and I was before all of this, who haven't built a community element of their tech, and they want to see if they can plug us into their kind of main product offering. So if you have any part of your business, whether it's technology or not, and maybe if you produce something that could be part of a bigger offering, and you get together with other startups or other people in your industry to create like a bigger offering, start thinking about how you could take parts of it and scale those bits up. So if we're looking at how to pivot, we're going to, well, sorry, that's all good pivots. There's of course bad pivots as well. Not all pivots succeed. I'm not going to make it sound like, you know, we're going to pivot and that's it. But there's a company that you probably haven't heard of called FlowTab, and that was an example of a failed pivot. It was they initially started out for allowing bar patrons to order and pay for drinks quickly using their smartphones, with a central tablet at the bar managing it. And in theory, that sounds awesome. Like we've all been to when we've been to the pub when it was busy, not today, obviously. Although on a personal note, the pub I passed by earlier this week was packed. So I don't know, people were not socially distancing here in Acton. But unfortunately, the bar patrons, they didn't want to have to pay for that service. So because the bar was passing along that cost to the patron, and the patron didn't want to pay for that. So they were still just waiting at the counters to pay. I do think if they had continued to pivot, that probably could have taken off, and maybe has taken off in other ways. They decided to then look at whether they could get it into sports stadiums and allowing you to order from your seat. But by the time they did that pivot, another competitor had taken off to do that. So when you start looking at the process of how to pivot, some basic steps, and then we'll talk about how we pivoted and why we pivoted. But, you know, as soon as possible. So I think it's sitting down, and I think we all are doing this now anyway. So if any of this is self-explanatory, I apologize. But, you know, doing it as soon as possible to make sure that we are taking expediency, I think, is the key here, right? So the sooner that we are looking at all the various steps, the faster we can start to respond to the market forces right now. I would still say you want to pick goals that align with your vision. So at the end of the day, you know, I think some of the feedback, knowledge I got about the cohort as well right now is that you are established businesses. And so people are buying from a product or service that they believe in, a company they believe in. Some of the trends we've seen over the last 5-10 years is that there's a lot more impact buying. People buy from brands and that they kind of believe in their values. So that's why brand value messaging really works, especially on social media with influencers and such. But I think no matter what we do, despite the fact that we are trying to survive this period, I think it still needs to survive within your vision and who you are as a business. Because remember, the end will come. At some stage, we all need to be positive that there will be an end to this. And so when we come out of this, you want to make sure that your company survives within its vision and its values, or else it's something very, very different. And it may be better, or it may not align with what you built it for in the first place. All the work that you've already done, you know, don't scrap that. I think, again, we know that, because pivots don't always require that much radical change. It might just be that we're identifying the bits that can be kept and those that need to be reused, while you define what the next thing is that you need to do. Listening to your customers. You know, I did a networking strategy call last night, online virtual networking. And one of the things that we said is, you know, talking and engaging with the database of customers and leads and contacts that we already have. You know, a lot of times those of us that run a lot of events are constantly out there running the event, preparing for the next one. And sometimes leads and potential customers fall through the cracks. I have signed 2 contracts this week with companies I've been talking to for like a year, but now is just the time that they actually have to focus on what we're doing. And they're like, well, content was always our issue. We didn't have time to build the content. Now we have time to build the content and get ready for our launch. So could there be something, you know, where either they've said if it's too expensive for them, see what you can do again in the cash flow thing by looking at your burn rate, looking at your absolute bottom line of what you can offer people right now to be able to survive. You know, look and also just listen to their feedback, because this could be a great time to clean up any sort of systems that weren't working, and that could make you more efficient and bring down, again, that run cost and burn rate. Looking at making sure the opportunities for growth. Now, this is a principle that I always share, but I think at the moment, if you need a pivot right now just to get through the next 3 to 6 months, then I think it's okay as long as it's in line with your values. But I do think that times like this also inspire a lot of innovation. They inspire, you know, we need to come up with solutions, and we need to come up with them fast. And one of the biggest premises of product market fit is getting something out there quickly and testing it fast and failing fast. The faster we fail with something, the faster we can learn from it and try again and fix it. And Ugenie has done that twice. So I wouldn't call them failures. I thought they were really big opportunities for learning. And I will share that starting, we'll go into that right now. So this is what we look like right now. Actually, in about a month and a half, it's going to look very different. It's actually going to look even more like LinkedIn. We're actually working with lots of business and membership-based communities. My VIP card is actually quite great. If any of you have businesses that want to, she's a local, it's a discount card for local business owners. And so you can register your business and get into their system. And then it's another way of exposure for your business. So I can't promise you'll get huge amounts of business, but I know that she is allowing a lot of people to join her right now. Get in touch with me if you have a product or service you might want to get onto that. Her website is myvipcard.co.uk. So yeah, we currently are in off-the-shelf community hub, which is tailorable with branding and groups and member types and et cetera for business communities. But we didn't start that way. We essentially started as a task sharing platform. So the idea was, referenced to my husband a little bit earlier, but we got married 5 years ago, and a lot of things start as problems in our own lives. It's going to sound a bit first world, especially what's going on right now, but we used to fight about who was going to drop off the dry cleaning. And as the CEO of our marriage, I had assigned him 3 tasks, and I said, you need to take care of these 3 things. I will take care of the rest. I had a lot of work from home time, and I was flexible, and I didn't, it wasn't a gender thing for me. I'm like, I am home, I can do a lot of things, but I need you to do these 3 things. And of course, one of them was to drop off and pick up of dry cleaning. It just never got done. Fahim and I come from a very strong social and religious community where we both grew up. It's how we met, that people share quite a lot already with each other. So from resources like prams in the Sunday school, or rides to and from mosque. But what we weren't doing is doing it efficiently. We didn't know who was in our community, like locally, so that I could drop off and pick someone up. I didn't know, and logistics is always the hardest part. If anyone who's doing a kind of task or resource sharing platform, a lot of times the problem for the consumers is they're so happy to share. It's how do I get this sofa from point A to point B, getting it or donating it. And so the whole idea was, how do we connect people locally? And the first division of the business was all about location-based task and resource sharing, in which we had to come up, we built the platform. This is what the first one looked like. Very, very different. It looks like Tinder for tasks, essentially. That was the idea for it. And, the first vision of it for us was free. It's for everyone. We just want to push it out there. There's a huge sustainability value there as well. We don't all need one of everything. I mean, the reference I always use is too American, but we don't all need a lawnmower when nobody in the UK has a lawn. Well, in London anyway. So, why are we all buying one of everything when we could really just be sharing these things and that have such a huge environmental impact? So, but then we thought about, well, okay, great. We do want to do that, but we don't want to run into the data issues that these bigger platforms are running into, and then having to sell data. I mean, Facebook was going through a lot of its kind of backlash of what it was doing with personal data, and consumers are getting smarter as well. We want to know where our data is going, how it's being used. So we thought, well, how are we going to monetize this thing? It's because platforms are not cheap to run. It's not like, it's all just sitting in the cloud somewhere. Cloud actually means rooms of servers, and that there's a huge cost there. So how are we going to monetize it? What's going to be our business model? And we thought, okay, well, maybe we could be a combination of the task sharing and free for communities, but also allow local businesses to advertise their services. So if you couldn't find someone, and also Gumtree is great, but I didn't feel like secure getting someone to come to my house off Gumtree. I didn't feel like at that time, I haven't looked at it in a while, if it was secure enough. TaskRabbit, which has come over from the States, is actually quite expensive. So, how do we kind of also give local businesses an opportunity to come on? Maybe that's how we monetize, by taking a small little success fee. But anyway, that's what it was. Ugenie was very, very different about connecting consumers. So it was a B2C. It was all about business to consumer. And we really would have had to raise, I think, millions of pounds to build the tech and then do the bigger part of a growth for a startup, which is marketing and sales, right? So the budget to do the Facebook ads and the Google SEO and just making sure enough people knew about our platform to use it. So we're like, okay, well, that's going to be difficult. It's fundraising in the UK is hard at the best of times. It's a very different environment than it is in other places. Is that going to be sustainable in the long run? we started then doing also a lot of product market fit. So we took this version of the app, we hadn't built the back end, and we just started giving it to people. So yes, using Facebook and using our own communities to say, what kind of things would you task share? Who would you task share with? Give us that feedback before we go and build the back end here, because that was going to cost quite a lot of money. And that product market fit, that feedback time that we took, is why also we shifted to a B2B, because it became the influencer model essentially at the end of the day. Community members were saying, we love the idea, and actually, but our local community isn't the one that we're the most connected to. We're actually connected to the moms at the nursery or the school. We're connected to people from our religious communities. We're connected to people from our startup communities. We have more affinity with them than we do with a neighbor. A couple people said to me, I bought my house, I didn't buy my neighbor. Like, I love that house. I actually really dislike my neighbor. And every time I see them, I like close the door. There was that whole thing. So we're like, well, if we really want people to adopt this, and in the leanest way possible, it's also about getting the community itself on board and it making its central tool. And so we started talking to the community leaders at that time and said, well, what are you using? And of course, all of the standard things, Facebook, WhatsApp, now WhatsApp in a bigger way, Slack to a certain extent with certain communities, also newsletters and websites. But the bigger thing that they were saying is that the challenges there were the privacy. Again, some communities couldn't use those social tools, so they're still just using newsletters or actually using notice boards. We're talking to one right now. It's a big sports franchise, and the biggest way they communicate with their members is a notice board in the gym to say, this is what's happening right now. They do have a great website. The corporate website is great, but there isn't that kind of targeted information to let people know about a specific change inside one of their facilities. So yeah, there was a full range of that, and privacy. And then the other thing, even with Facebook group owners, they were saying, well, yes, but how can we guarantee that the right people are going to see our posts? And if they're paying us a membership fee, then we can't, they're going to leave. And they were getting a lot of that retention. So we then realized that actually we hadn't built the admin dashboard to actually facilitate the community to share. And this is not the best image, but we had to build a second piece of technology to actually support the new key stakeholder, which was the community leaders themselves. Once we had built this, we did an alpha test. We put it out there again. And we actually did it for free. And although I should have probably started testing whether people were willing to pay for it at that time, but we pushed it out for free, and we did it with social communities that didn't have a paying subscription or membership. And what we learned there was that the transition from social platforms to something else that was free just wasn't sticky enough, not from a user perspective, because actually we had a lot of people shift over. I know it's hard to switch people from platforms, but if there's a strong enough need and loyalty, they do it. But when the person who's running the community is a volunteer or has no monetary benefits, they're going to not make it a priority, and then that community will fall apart. So we shifted again for our beta to paid communities where there's a membership, coaches, courses, parent communities, where again, they had the need to have their own platform and wanted to invest in that. We did then start charging. And so even right now, I know things are really hard, but I would say, talk to your potential customers, talk to your existing customers. What can they afford to pay, right? It's not about just let's give everything away for free. We can't then afford to grow and run our own businesses, but let's take into account the external factors where they may not be able to pay our normal pricing, but might be able to pay a fraction of it. And potentially as a growth opportunity as well, getting it out to more people who maybe might have said to you in the past, I can't afford your tech. So, there was a lot of our journey was over a couple of years. Our target client shifted again last year. So we've done quite a lot of shifts because our beta taught us a lot as well. And we shifted to more medium-sized organizations, and a lot of testing has shown us that. So that's just a bit about our journey and some of the things that we learned. I mean, a lot of those are, when in not a time like right now. So I think for those businesses that have some runway, that have the ability to test and understand if what you're doing is working for people, is there any way to make it more efficient? From those that need business and from a lead generation point of view, looking at the databases that you currently have to go back to old leads, being consistent online, finding the right groups and people. And some of this, and I'm doing this talk, and I know we're all focused on business right now because it's one of my main concerns. I'm also feeling, I don't know if anyone else feels, that some people are just worried about paying their rent, including, I'm sure, people here as well. But, you know, also not, I want to put this stuff out on social media, but I don't want to, quote unquote, take advantage. So it's, I'm struggling with this myself. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. In terms of pivoting and perish in a normal environment, before we move on to tips for right now, is focusing on the wins. You know, if you figure out something that's working right now, double down, get that out there, do it with more people, share it with your network, throw out your ego. It might not be perfect. I mean, our first version of Ugenie was, even the beta version, I'm still like, oh my God, there was so much wrong with it. I'm sure we're going to launch the next version. I'm still going to say, oh my God, there's so much wrong with it. But it's never going to be perfect. We just need to get it out there to start testing. Following the money. I think with here, we have to caveat it a little bit, as much as people can afford, trying to get that in there, but looking at what is absolutely necessary to keep us running, and talking to our clients. And I think what I would actually put right now is also talking to our staff and our employees, for those of you that have staff and employees, because I know the biggest concern I'm hearing as well is, you know, how do we keep our people? How do we keep our staff? Because everyone's relying on us. I mean, there's, you know, British Airways, we're hearing about all these big corporations that are letting people off on unpaid leave. Cafes, the travel industry, everybody's been hit so hard. So how do we keep our staff? How do we afford to pay them? And I think we have to be really honest with ourselves, in that we may not be able to pay everyone as much as we were, you know, if at all. Can we start like looking at employee option schemes, sharing equity? I mean, that's a pivot as well. If you share and change the way that you're going to grow, in terms of, you know, let's get through this phase together. We'll do what we can in terms of you know, cash and payments, but let's get through this phase. And maybe what we can do is you guys can invest into the company and become a part of this, and we can all survive this together. And that's something that I've been hearing about. I mean, I know a lot of, like, you know, Sequoia Capital from Silicon Valley, a lot of the VCs and are saying, you know, for startups to slow down, stop hiring, slash our spending, work from home, cut out travel. I mean, cutting out travel and working from home might not even be an option for us in the next couple of days. But essentially, you know, I think looking at our cash flow in the harshest and strictest and most objective light as possible. I'm trying to not cut work for people right now, but even I might need to do that. I mean, something I might need to cut is my marketing person, right? Or at least reduce the amount of time that we are spending on marketing and growth. We're pulling all of our Facebook ads. We're pulling all of our SEO efforts. That doesn't affect real people, but the person who does that for me, I might not be able to pay her fully, or I might need to say, look, I need to defer this, but have that really honest relationship with people. One of my staff members is not going to take salary. Again, he's in the position to do that, but I've been, again, very honest with him to say, can we defer this for a period of time? Because although we have the funding to build our product, we still have revenue coming in to help us with our staff costs. So just having those conversations to see what we can do. And you know, the two people I'm relying on have agreed to do that with me. So in terms of also with cash flow, I guess what we have gone back to with some of our clients is, again, saying, we can do a deferred payment plan for you, but if you can pay, please do. And again, and just being really honest with them, and everyone is being, I don't know, I think it's also bringing on the best in people. From a supplier point of view, I've been hearing a lot of conversations about people going to their landlords and saying, look, we can't pay the rent right now. Can you do anything for us? And I actually have heard some really positive things with people getting 50% of a rent reduction for now to be paid back at a later date. You know, hopefully that helps. If you can't pay rent at all, you know, I'm hearing things about loans that are coming from the government. We started at the very beginning of this call that we can continue to share resources, because some of these things are just really, really unclear of how we can access these resources and when. Because I think expediency as well, like it's well and great that they're announcing that we can get funding, but how do we get it and when do we get it? And so I think in terms of that, in terms of any supplies you don't need, you know, I would definitely try to cut down as much as possible. And from a fundraising perspective, it's going to be really hard. I mean, we've stopped our fundraise. We were fundraising, not a very big round, but we were fundraising. We have stopped that. I've been reading quite a lot of stuff, and maybe the Hatch team will have a bit more insight on this because they work with a lot more funders. But I think in terms of people who are raising from angels or smaller investors, it's going to be a bit of a hard time in terms of counting on funding. So again, as we get more advice and feedback, happy to share that as well. So I guess the biggest thing to leave you guys with before we go into the town hall and just kind of talk about real questions and where we can support each other, because that's another, you know, conversation, is any suggestions and feedback, and see what else we can buy from the collective that might be within the incubator, the accelerator, anyone who's joining us tonight, is can we purchase supplies from each other? Is there anything that I can buy from another small business in need or a startup in need? Can we collaborate to offer something out to the market that will be could be valuable? There's some EU grants and things that are also coming out for people who can get out their product and change it to help with COVID. So again, things like that. But I think in terms of all of the practical tips, if I can leave you with anything in terms of pivoting, is really just take any plans you had for 2020 and kind of throw them out, rip them up, throw them out. I think everything is changing right now. And think about taking every part of your product and service and breaking it down as granular as possible, thinking about what could that offer someone right now with our current situation. And I'm thinking we all kind of also need to get through the next week and a half, because at the moment, like today, we didn't cancel things. We just tried to move everything virtual, but we had a lot of cancellations with people who were saying, oh my God, my kids are now coming home. I need to go and take care of that. I can't talk about business today or tomorrow. So when we were talking to our team about what we're going to do in terms of communications with our own customers, but also prospectives, is probably nothing for a week. Let people settle down in terms of this lockdown that is coming. And I'm not trying to fearmonger it. If I don't think I'm wrong, I've heard it from lots of sources that I trust, but I'm hearing it's coming this weekend. Again, don't quote me. If I'm wrong, I apologize right now, but preparing for that potential eventuality. But even if just all the kids are home from tomorrow, parents are going to start adjusting to having kids at home, not necessarily focusing on their businesses. So sending out communications right now in the next couple of days probably is just going to get missed anyway. So taking the time to, as you're looking at how you can adjust for the next 3 to 6 months, looking at potentially kind of getting through this initial craze and then planning those messages, not only at the right times, but consistently across whichever platforms you're going to be doing. So that's from a lead generation point of view. From a cash flow, cut as much as possible, as much as you can. I always feel with the staffing, as much as in a black and white world, I would say cut everything that you don't need to actually bare minimum run your business and get you through this right now. On the other side of it, though, I know, our teams are so important to us. They're parts of our journeys as startups. We're not doing this on our own. We're doing it with our collectives. So it can be a really hard time. So on that front, but from a fundraising perspective, I think it's going to be really, really hard. So the guidance, can I hand it over to the Hatch team to maybe share anything on the fundraising note? Because I'm sure there are startups in here that are fundraising. I don't know if there's anything you guys can share.
Yeah, can you hear me, everyone? I'm just going to put my video on. To be honest, like we didn't really as a charity, we work with sponsors. So we have had to go back to them, to our bank account as well, to bankers as well. But what I've been talking with other people that runs community, and at the moment I know that lots of things are frozen because investors want to do the one-to-one meetings and they don't want to go online because they still want to have the feel in the room, I've been told. So lots of people have stopped fundraising. Which means that they probably are focusing on the portfolio that they have at the moment, trying to find solutions for their own startups that they are in portfolio. But they will have, if we stay in lockdown as it is in France or Italy or Spain, they will have to go online. So it might be a good thing to contact them and see, and to be on that list of people if you still want to fundraise, to be first in the list of seeing them online.
Yeah, and I think if anybody doesn't have a video of their product or service or a solid pitch deck, I would get that ready. I don't know if any of you guys have heard about Yingdi. It's one of those Chinese, they're trying to bring Chinese investment into the UK as well. And they've asked us to create a product video, and they don't want like a deck. They want something where the investors can really connect with us on video. So if you are fundraising, maybe start getting those resources ready. I think a lot of, you're right, a lot of investors are being told to focus on their own kind of portfolios at the moment. And so I think it's going to be a harsher time, meaning we need to go back and focus on our own revenue models a bit more, monetizing them and figuring out how we can show that, streamlining processes as well. I'm going to just look at the questions that are in the chat and just see if we can address any of them that we didn't address before. Some of the things about going online, I've done that personally myself. I run on pitch nights actually, which are always done better in person. We have a panel that comes in and it's about body language. It's about the way you present, right? So those are all in-person things. We have converted that to an online pitch night. So the